Hello, School Transportation Nation. Tony Corpin here with School Transportation News. You've made it to episode 100. Can't believe it. We made it. All right. And it's brought to you by Transfinder. They've been with us since the beginning, and they're the leader in school bus routing. Excited to also have a clean school bus tip from Nuvi, a San Diego-based clean tech company helping schools intelligently electrify their fleets. And later I'll also be talking to Fin Livingston, the GM at Scraper Systems by Rite-Hite. They are North America's leading rooftop snow removal machine company for buses. So excited for that. And also, I have Mr. Ryan Gray with me. Ryan, welcome, 100. Can you believe it?
Hello. Yes, 100. We've got a little arthritis in the hip, but other than that, we're going strong. It's been a great time. I mean, it's flown by. So much of when we started this thing, we were just starting with the pandemic. We're weathering that storm. Things are looking brighter, hopefully, here as we head into the spring. But it's great to be here. And thank you to all our listeners for being along the journey with us. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, I agree, Ryan. And I know we were talking to producer Claudia before and putting together some stats, and I thought I'd hit you guys with some of the stats. So we've been doing, after 100 episodes of the School Transportation Nation podcast, we have over 36,000 plays across all our podcast platforms. So 36,000, that's a lot of listens, Ryan. People have put up with us for that many times. I don't know.
Absolutely. Lots of love being shown out there. So again, we appreciate it. And this is an interactive opportunity. I know you guys are all listening to this, but by interactive, I'm talking about, hey, hit us up with things you want to talk about or you want us to talk about. If you want to come on podcast, we'd love to have you. So, and speaking of our guests, really happy to a little bit later on be talking with Josh Rice. He's the Transportation and Fleet Services Director at Barbers Hill Independent School District east of Houston. He's also the current president of the Texas Association for Pupil Transportation. So we'll be catching up on with Josh in a little bit. And he's got some great news to share about how they're addressing the driver shortage out there.
Yeah, Josh, cool guy. We always catch up with him down at the TSD conference down in Dallas. He's always been a staple there, comes visit with us. And that one's actually happening in November now. We moved the date if you didn't get the memo. It's November 8th through the 12th, tsdconference.com for more on that one, as well as STN Expo Indianapolis. We have our super early bird discount, save $200. It's ending in early March. So if you guys are thinking about jumping in on that, you definitely want to sign up before the end of February and lock in that savings to come to STN Expo Indianapolis. We've got a great crash test demonstration we're hosting out at IMMI Safeguard at their Cape facility. It's quite a unique experience to witness a bus crash. It's a bit of a controlled environment with test dummies, but really interesting to see the outcomes. And I invite you to come see that. Very interesting stuff. And we've also got STN Expo in Reno, Nevada, which is kind of our big one that we do every year. And this year we are presenting it in collaboration with Green Bus Summit. So that's July 15th through the 20th in Reno, Nevada. Definitely come out. We've got some great events, networking. Green Bus Summit's going to be an outdoor event. Actually, we're putting together more of a festival style event with a live band, music, food. There'll be an immersive green technology display outside, ride and drive on the newest, latest, and greatest alternative energy vehicles. So quite an interesting thing we've put together. So excited to have you guys come out and see that. STNexpo.com for all the details there. And we have our super early bird savings as well that you can lock in. So please take advantage of that. Good stuff. Ryan, want to kind of touch a little bit on some of the other 100 top things that are happening with the podcast. So 462 active listeners on Apple Podcasts alone. If you guys aren't listening on Apple Podcasts, make sure and follow us there. We'd love to have you as a listener regularly, so we just pop up in your podcast feed. So that's really great. And also the most listened to episode was actually episode 10. That was like right in the beginning. We were like deep in pandemic times. And that was called Moving Forward Transportation Directors Share 2020-2021 School Bus Plans. Everybody was looking to kind of make a plan then, Ryan, weren't they?
Yep. And a lot of people were looking for ideas. I think, a lot of people, if you remember way back then, we were all locked down. There were a lot of the districts. I mean, all the districts really nationwide, they had closed down. They'd gone to virtual. This was at the very beginning when, school buses were out there delivering meals to students, Wi-Fi, school supplies. Folks thought they might shut down for a couple days, a couple weeks, maybe a couple months, and it went from there. So, definitely when we launched this thing, it was opportune time for getting a lot of information out there to people because they were just like sponges wanting to hear what their peers were doing from all across the nation to get ideas of what to do next.
Yeah, big trends, Ryan. I mean, when we look back now, look at school bus electrification, right? It's moved so far in the last few years that it just sped up so much. I know many years ago we had a keynote address at STN Expo, and the speaker talked a lot about kind of these changes, and here it is, full circle. Electric school buses are on the road. It's happening. And we got a great clean bus tip this week from Nuvi, a San Diego-based clean tech company helping schools intelligently electrify their fleets. They offer a complete turnkey solution to help schools confidently electrify fleets. They provide expert guidance through every step of the process, from selecting electric buses and recommending the best charging solutions based on the district's routes. Also, grant writing support, flexible financing options. With Nuvi, you'll enjoy the world's most intelligent charging, simple tools for your transportation directors and drivers, and the opportunity to bring cleaner rides to your students and community today. You can check them out at nuvi.com/STN. That's nuvi.com/STN. So, Ryan, I know we got a lot of big headlines. We saw something big come out of Reno last week. Talk to me. What's happening out in Reno?
Yeah, well, that school bus driver shortage, I know it's really been hitting them hard. Talking with Scott Lee, the director of transportation, when we were up in Reno in December with STN Expo, and we had to move it back last year. He could get away for a day. He came in and sat in on a general session with us. But he was like, Ryan, he's like, we're just slammed with this driver shortage. And, sure enough, the district announced last week that it's basically cutting school bus or reducing school bus service for general education students district wide. So that's going to impact about 15 to 16,000 students, Scott was telling me just last week. We have an article up on stnonline.com. You can read more about it. But it's essentially, it's a pretty interesting move. They're going to essentially have school bus outages. So some schools in certain areas will basically have school bus service eliminated for a week before they can come back on. And it's kind of this tiered rollout or blackout, if you will, these outages. So, one area of schools will have school buses one week, the next they won't, and then another area will have school busing. It's all because they're down, as of last week, about 88 drivers. They normally have about 303 drivers when fully staffed. Scott was telling me that they've had to pull in about 27 or 28 office staff and some maintenance folks and whatnot to drive. And even some other folks in the district that have CDLs. So certainly, this school bus driver shortage seemingly in a lot of places is getting worse before it's getting better. But in other places, like we're going to hear from Josh Rice and a little bit from Barbers Hill ISD in Texas, at least for now, his driver shortage issue is solved. But definitely, there's still a lot of folks out there feeling pain.
Yeah, it's just an ongoing thing, Ryan. I know with the mask mandate being removed in a lot of places, I know we touched on that a lot last week. And now with that happening more and more, how are drivers feeling about that? Are we going to have more driver outages? The question becomes, what is the, halo effect of removing masks? Are we going to see the amplification of drivers being out, sick? I just don't know what to think of it. I've seen both sides of the conversation. Some people say,
Well, Tony, you got to remember, we still have that federal order in place. So last year, President Biden signed that executive order that basically required or mandated mask use on public transportation, including school buses. The CDC then came out and kind of, issued that regulation. That's still in effect. Now, maybe not every state is following that, but a lot of states that are relaxing the mask mandate, you got to keep in mind that's for in schools. That's not necessarily on school buses. So we still have that in play. Actually, I was just checking the CDC website to see if there was any updates, and that regulation is still in effect. And they even say on their site it will remain in effect until they issue an update. And as of yet, that has not happened. So we've, had legal experts weigh in on this. In fact, we had an article in our February issue by Matt Doss, a legal expert, transportation legal expert out of New York City. He also spoke on this topic at our Bus Technology Summit virtual way back in, speaking of 2020, back in September of 2020, that, districts really run the risk of getting in trouble, legally if they don't follow some of these regulations. And maybe they won't get fined or pinged by the federal government, but it certainly in this litigious society opens up potential lawsuits down the road. So it's not all, rosy in terms of, hey, the mask mandate's done in some of these states. We still have that school bus regulation that districts and states really should be paying attention to.
Yeah, it's an ongoing thing, Ryan. I know it stresses some people out. It's just, I'm ready for it to come off, right? I just feel that way. I'm just ready. I'm over it. It's just like after a while, you got to just be like, all right, we got to press forward, but you got to follow the rules too, right? So there's that fine line that we have to all walk as professionals, right? You got to.
And in fact, last week we were talking about the, is this endemic or not? And you said, boy, it certainly isn't it? Aren't we endemic yet? And I made the comment, well, until the powers that be really come out and say, hey, we're done. Interestingly, like a couple days later, after the podcast came out last week, the Biden administration, they didn't issue anything specific, but there's been chatter and comments being made that we need to learn how to live with this. President Biden's really taken some flack from medical experts nationwide that he hasn't shifted this conversation sooner, but definitely they got the memo. Hearing a lot more of that conversation now that, we need to now transition and prepare society to live with COVID, as well as all the other infectious diseases that exist today and that probably don't exist and we're going to get hit with in the coming years. This is not like, hey, we get past COVID and we're all good. Infectious diseases are kind of here to stay, and we're always going to see, I think, new strains of certain stuff. So we can't grind the economy and grind society to a halt every single time. Certainly, there's a lot of lessons that we've learned and still need to learn from this experience. But, we need to transition ourselves to be able to, okay, we have to deal with it now.
Well, Ryan, I got something that's going to make everybody's life a little better. It's called the Transfinder Trifecta. That's Route Finder Plus, Stop Finder, Wayfinder, 3 solutions that work seamlessly together. Routing software, parent app, driver app. Transfinder's got it. And there's a lot more too. Inventory management, location intelligence, accurate placement on the map. Transfinder, they've got it all. And they're that all-in-one service provider to help your school transportation department, period. They're the leader in everything to do with school transportation, with more than 3 decades of experience with 3,000 school districts across North America. They've seen it all. They've built a solution for their clients that works, and they want you to check it out too. Go to Get Plus at transfinder.com or call them at 800-373-3609 to learn more. All right, guys, talking to Fin Livingston, General Manager of Scraper Systems, coming up next here. Looking forward to it. All right, guys, super excited to have our next guest on, Fin Livingston from Scraper Systems by Rite-Hite. Fin, welcome to the podcast.
No, thank you. It's great to be here.
Excellent. I was thinking about you earlier because I'm taking my family up for a ski trip in Mammoth Mountain, California, and we're going to be lots of snow. I'm checking the snow report every day, and I'm thinking, oh God, just have to clean off my car, go through that process, and I know people, it's seasonal right now, right? Buses are out there. If it's snowing back east, you might be feeling that right now, and I can imagine the process of people trying to clear snow off the buses. We were talking a little earlier. It's like they have rakes and brushes and it's super heavy. Sounds just like not like a fun experience for drivers. So why don't you tell us a little bit about, how did Scraper Systems come up with such a great product? What's it doing for your customers now? And some of the benefits that they're experiencing.
Okay, well, the product was originally developed for the trucking industry. And we soon found out that, the bus industry was having the same issue. So around 2012, we introduced our first bus model, which basically is a V-shaped plow that lowers on the top of the bus. And it has a series of brushes on the bottom that have stiff bristles that allow the plow to go over top of the bus and conform to the contours of the bus, go over hatches, go over strobe lights, go over antenna, anything like that, and clear the snow off safely and quickly. Like you mentioned before, really reducing the labor required, reducing the risk of injury to your employees, and just making the job easier so that everyone's safe.
Yeah, excellent. So, okay, I'm visualizing this. There's a plow. My bus drives through the plow, takes all the heavy snow off so my drivers don't have to. And then they just drive off on their morning route. Is that about sum it up?
Essentially, that's it. It's supposed to be that easy. That's what we set out to do. I mean, some bus companies might have 2 or 3 guys that work the machine and run all the buses through themselves. Other ones, like you said, have the driver just go on their way, which is the most efficient way.
Very interesting. And then can you share about maybe a school district or a school bus contractor that's using your systems now?
Yeah, I think about, well, we have hundreds of them out there, but Foxborough, Massachusetts is a famous place, home of the Patriots, I guess. I don't know if anyone's a Patriots fan out there. I'm not, but I'm a fan of Foxborough because they bought our product. But they get a lot of snow in Massachusetts, and they were taking all day to clear the snow off their buses and using those snow rakes that are tiring and labor intensive and dangerous, frankly. And they bought our fleet plow, MD12B, about 2 years ago, and they've been very happy. Now, a crew of 3 guys can clean up their, I don't know the exact number off the top of my head, but I want to say about 100 buses in a couple hours. And it's a tremendous labor savings, and it makes the life much better for the maintenance guys and the drivers who no longer have to do that backbreaking work.
Yeah, I can imagine with the driver shortage and driver retention, this is like a godsend. They're like, thank you for doing this for us, administration, getting this for us. Is that the general reaction out there?
That totally is. I mean, we do a lot of trade shows where we go to these different bus associations in the various states. I haven't found anybody that said they didn't want one or enjoyed using those snow rakes. It's a tremendous thing for those guys.
What's the process in installing a plow at a site? What's that look like?
Well, we have a nationwide network of service techs, and we can have them installed for you. It would take about a day, and they bring in some equipment and install it. But our product, the MD12B that I mentioned before, is designed so that you can save money, and schools or bus contractors can assemble it themselves. It's a series of steel components that are bolted together. Nothing weighs more than 60 pounds. And 2 people that are inexperienced assemblers can put it together in a day with just using an impact wrench and a forklift.
Oh, that sounds pretty easy process. And yeah, that's exciting. I like that, it has the ability to save that workers' comp kind of element that drivers could be affected, staff could be effective. Anything that makes our life a little easier is really good. And I can imagine there's some real safety issues too with clearing snow because it's got to be heavy, right?
It's heavy, it's slippery. When you're pulling things down on top of your head from on top of the bus and standing on ice, you can imagine the danger that lurks there. And one workman's comp claim can pay for this machine. So we get a lot of calls from folks saying, we had somebody injured, now we need to get your product. I spend my lifetime telling them, well, you need to get the product before somebody gets injured. That's the whole point. So it does pay for itself pretty quickly when it comes to workman's comp of those things, but it also pays for itself very quickly when it comes to the labor savings, because it's not cheap to have, 10 people out there clearing snow for hours upon hours. So, depending on how often it snows, you get a pretty quick payback.
Beautiful. Well, if I'm interested in learning more about your fleet plows, what is my next step? Where do I go to find out more information?
More information, as always, is on our website, scrapersystems.com. Like I mentioned before, we have a nationwide and actually all through Canada network of salespeople and service techs that would be happy to help you out with that.
Excellent. Finn, thank you so much for coming on. Appreciate you sharing a little bit about what Scraper Systems have to offer. And if you guys got snow, this is definitely the product for you. So check it out.
Thank you.
All right, guys, next up, Ryan Gray is talking with Josh Rice at Barbers Hill near Houston. He's the transportation director and also the president of TAPT. Looking forward to that conversation.
Want to welcome Josh Rice, the Director of Transportation at Barbers Hill Independent School District east of Houston. Josh, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks, Ron, for having me on the show today.
And I have to call you Mr. President. You are the current president of the Texas Association for Pupil Transportation. So thank you very much for being with us. So let's talk the driver shortage, right? It seems to be the topic of conversation that just is not going away. It's always been affecting the industry, right? But I've heard it referred to as an emergency by some people. Being the Texas Association president, what are you gauging in terms of the driver shortage statewide?
I would definitely say the driver shortage is moderate to severe in most of the districts throughout the state. And that's kind of been a common thing we've seen over the last couple of years. I do think COVID impacted us. COVID was definitely the talk of everything for a while. And it does seem like we're kind of on the downhill stretch of talking with COVID, and we're right back into that being short of drivers again and trying to figure out, the biggest thing on our plate every day is just how to survive on covering routes in the morning and the afternoon.
Yeah. So I know a lot of your peers in Texas and, elsewhere across the nation, they are, directors and they're assigning themselves routes. Has that been your experience at your new district there in Barbers Hill?
At the first of this school year and up until recently, absolutely. I was definitely driving a bus when we started doubling up on routes to try to relieve some of the pressure off of that.
So you joined Barbers Hill over the summer. Where were you before that?
Before coming to Barbers Hill, I was actually in Klein ISD, which is kind of northwest of Houston, much larger district with, 55,000 kids. And we were transporting probably 25,000 kids a day there.
Mm-hmm. And that's reduced significantly. You went to a much smaller district, kind of a boutique, if you will, borrowing from the marketing firm parlance. But, you're now transporting about 7,000 students a day?
I have definitely downsized and found a little special place in Texas. Barbers Hill is a great district, definitely smaller in size, probably a tenth of the fleet that I was used to managing before. Mm-hmm. But same kind of problems we face every day. Unfortunately, now in my career, I can say I've been at a very small district and a very large district, and we all face those exact same issues, just on different scales.
So when you joined over the summer, I understand it was because the previous transportation director actually had died from COVID-19, Becky Nelson. So that obviously, condolences. I know you coming in, it's your new family. I would imagine that still resonates with a lot of your staff now. So that's, never easy to deal with when things like that happen, especially suddenly. But here you are, you come in over the summer, you take the reins, and what was the first thing that struck you, whether it be regarding the school bus driver shortage, the smaller district? I know you're big on technology. Was there one thing that stood out above others that you really felt that you had to deal with first?
Probably the first thing I noticed coming into a smaller district from where I came from was really getting back to grassroots. There was a lot of things that I have not done in a long time, and I had to relearn how to do. Coming from a much larger district, even things like bringing drivers in, I never was part of pulling applications, doing interviews, scheduling and doing all those pre-checks before we hire people. And coming to a district that was much smaller, definitely on the first day, I remember looking around going, man, there's no one here but me and a couple of other people to make this system work. So I definitely learned early on that you can't forget where you came from, and you've got to be willing to get down in the trenches and do the same thing again.
Mm-hmm. I was mentioning that you've been big on technology at all your previous stops. Was technology already in place to the level of what you've experienced at some of your other districts, or has that been something that you guys have had to address?
No, Ron. Actually, when I came in, the technology was very, very low. We were still running paper route sheets, some of which were put in through a routing program, some of which were still handwritten, definitely handwritten seating charts, work orders. No real technology as far as GPS or student accountability. And so we have definitely looked at all of that over the past couple of months since I've been there, implemented a lot of stuff with our Google Docs, got our routing software up and going, and very soon looking towards getting, GPS and student tracking, student accountability going on the buses.
Okay. And with student tracking, a big talk of the town right now is the parent-facing apps. Is that something also that you're going to try to spin out there?
Absolutely. So the district before I got there had actually looked at implementing the student accountability, and it just kind of gotten put on the side burner. But it's definitely one of the things that was part of me coming into the district was bringing that technology. And parents want to be connected now. They want to know how far the bus is in the morning from their house. They want to know when their kid's been delivered in the afternoon. And they expect good communication. If the bus is involved in an accident, they want to be notified. If the bus is delayed, or maybe you've deleted that run that day because you're short of drivers and you're doubling up routes, they definitely want to have that communication. And honestly, in today's time, it's not an excuse for us anymore to say we can't do it, because the technology's out there. We just have to embrace it and be able to move forward with it.
So with a new routing system, it sounds like the first that Barbers Hill has had. So much, though, goes into accuracy of those routes, right? Because if you're going to have that student tracking and that parent-facing app, you need to make sure that the data is correct, don't you?
Right. So a lot of that has been making sure the mapping's correct. And we're a fast-growing district in Texas at 8 to 10% a year. So making sure that the new streets are in the map, that they're geocoded correctly, that our kids are coming in and being placed correctly on the map, and working daily with drivers to ensure that routes are up to date, and that, before we get ready to implement the student accountability portion, we definitely want to make sure that buses are traveling correctly, they're stopping at the correct stops, they're loading their correct students, so that's kind of a seamless transition when we get ready.
In terms of that fast-growing district, are there any plans right now or maybe in the near future that has been talked about by the administration of new school sites? What's your boundaries in your service area look like? Is there a lot of room for growth, or are you kind of maxed out in terms of your pocket where you currently are?
So Barbers Hill definitely has a lot of room for growth. We will actually open up 2 intermediate schools this August. So in the midst of getting routes and stuff kind of in order into the system and transitioning through this first year, we're also facing the opening of 2 new campuses, as well as moving us from a 2-tier bell system to a 3-tier bell system, not to mention complete facility renovation and building a new building for transportation. So it has definitely been a very busy first 6 months to a year.
Absolutely. Trial by fire, but like you said, you've done this, you've been there, you've done that. And you said it's got to be exhilarating to kind of go back to your roots a little bit and be really a lot more hands-on. And it's exciting to be undertaking those big projects. But with that growth, I would imagine, kind of back to the school bus driver conversation, you're probably going to be needing more school bus drivers going forward, won't you?
Sure. Definitely in a growing district, we'll continue to add routes as needed. We'll be very fortunate this summer in going from that 2-tier system to a 3-tier system. We should be able to maintain our current fleet load or be able to cut back on a few routes. Just by spreading those kids out onto more tiers, we open up a little bit more capacity. But with the growth, that's not going to get us but about a year until we'll have to start adding routes back in.
Okay. And speaking of growth, I understand that the school bus driver wages have been growing. A lot of the conversation again about how can we attract more school bus driver applicants to the industry, retain the ones that we want to have and want to keep. So much we talk about these different, culture and certainly student behavior on the bus. If you don't have that locked up, that can drive folks away. But it really comes back to pay a lot of times. And, you guys have been really innovative in pay. Can you tell us what the school board recently approved?
Sure. So, Ron, what happened with us was just like any other district, we were short of drivers. And it got to the point where we were doubling routes. And when I say the word double, I'm not saying that you're taking on an extra route with your kids that day. We were leaving kids at a campus. And so we were, picking up our first tier run, having to leave, 200, 300, 400 kids at a campus. And then as soon as whoever got done first was going back to those campuses and getting those kids. And our administration quickly took hold of that and realized that wasn't acceptable for us. Kids that have been on a campus all day, they're ready to go home. Teachers are ready to go home, and we don't want to have our kids suffering and sitting there on the campus. So we did start looking around at other district wages, and we kind of thought a little bit out of the box, because a lot of times districts get stuck on how to be competitive with who's around them. I've got to compete with these other districts, and we're kind of getting into a world now where our drivers are more valuable than just other ISDs. They can go to work for plenty of private companies, Amazon, FedEx, UPS, those different kind of companies with a CDL. And so when we looked at structure and pay, we really tried to get with kind of where the market was, not just the pupil transportation industry, but where else could our drivers go to? As far as our bus drivers, we were at $17.50 an hour. Our board did approve a historic pay increase, not just for Barbers Hill ISD, but probably across the nation. We took our starting pay from $17.50 an hour to $25 an hour. We also did not compress our scale. So a lot of times when you do a significant increase, those drivers that are 10, 15, 20 years really get kind of crunched in the scale and get just pennies over the dollar from where a starting driver did. And we maintained kind of the ratio with our new folks, with our existing folks. And so they got a 25-cent increase per year of experience over the 25. And so, we've got many drivers now that are $29, $30 an hour based on their years of experience.
Mm-hmm. And, a lot of times when we're talking about the wage increases and hourly wages going up, I hear from a lot of school bus drivers. We have a pretty active audience on our social media channels that are talking about, hey, these wage hikes are great, but we want guaranteed hours. What do your hours look like? Are you able to offer more hours, more of an 8-hour day guaranteed? What's that looking like?
So right now we are on annualized pay. We do guarantee 5 hours a day. That's what they're annualized at. Mm-hmm. But most of our routes are at least 6 to 7 hours a day. The nice thing about that is just because they're annualized at 5, when they do work that 7 a day, then they're paid the difference between that at their regular rate. And so it's not a lower paycheck throughout the year. It's actually a larger paycheck throughout the year, and then it shrinks a little bit down in the summer. But definitely as we finish out the school year, we'll look at increasing our hours too. We really kind of wanted to target pay because we were getting to a point where, we just weren't even getting applications. You would log in the application system every day, and I would go 2 or 3 weeks and not see an application.
So that's been in place since, I believe, mid to late January. Have you seen any impact?
Absolutely. The night that actually before our board actually approved it, we had met with our human resource and finance division. Our superintendent actually joined us in that meeting, and we decided as a district it was going to be something we would have to do to move forward and be successful, and then we'd be recommended to the board. And our superintendent, super nice guy, Dr. Greg Poole, has been in Barbers Hill for almost 15 years now and done some amazing things and really thinks outside the box. But he told us that day sitting in the meeting, he was like, I'm going to get this pushed through our board. You guys go ahead and start spreading the word. Let's get this problem fixed. And so by the time the board had actually approved it, I mean, we were getting flooded with applications. We went from 2 or 3 applications a month to I probably got 30 applications within about 2 or 3 days. And fortunately, we were able to cure our driver shortage issue within about 2 weeks after the board meeting.
Oh, outstanding. Of course, something else when it comes to new drivers coming in, the new entry-level driver training regulations that went in place earlier this month from the FMCSA. A lot of districts and states that I've talked to have said, hey, it's really not impacting us too much. But for others, it's a really big change, especially coming into a new district and how things had been going, before you started your tenure there. Have you guys had to address anything in terms of entry-level training with this new regulation?
Sure. With entry-level driver training, anybody in the school bus market probably had to go back and take a look at their curriculum and revamp a few things, because as an industry, we've always trained bus drivers. I mean, when people came in, we trained them to drive a school bus, and we didn't focus on a lot of things like hours of service and weigh stations. And so we definitely had to go back and take a look at the curriculum and plug in that stuff that ELDT was looking to cover. But I would say overall that 85 to 95% of our curriculum was pretty good from the get-go. When you go through the ELDT checklist that they have for Class A and Class B, it was easy to run down the list and say, yep, we cover that, we cover that. We can probably do better on this area, and then just make those revisions.
And also, too, I think when it comes to retaining drivers or attracting them, we mentioned technology before. So you guys are really ramping up and putting in place technology that never existed in Barbers Hill. We also hear a lot about the new vehicles. Can you take us through what your fleet looks like? I mean, you said I think it's around 60 school buses you have in your fleet. Are you guys all diesel? Are you looking at alternative fuels? Do you have any alternative fuels already?
So we have about 60 to 70 buses in the fleet, continuing to grow that as we grow our district. Majority of the fleet is diesel. We do have about a dozen propane buses. We actually have a grant out right now that we're waiting to hear back on for additional propane buses, as well as some electric buses to come into the fleet.
Okay. Yeah, I know that slowly but surely I'm hearing from some districts about electric and some grants. So definitely keep us in the loop on that when more information is available.
We are in an amazing fleet replacement plan. I walked in the district, and the replacement plan on our buses is 15 years or 150,000 miles. So really nice to be somewhere that supports the turnover of vehicles, so that it's not just about getting a new bus. That does look nice, don't get me wrong, but new buses bring a lot more safety features that a bus that was 10 and 15 years doesn't have. It brings better fuel economy, cleaner for the environment. So it's more than just walking down your fleet and looking at a brand new fleet. It's the things that it does to help improve your community that you live in.
And I mentioned like the student behavior issue being one of those topics that maybe doesn't get as much play outside of this industry as it should when you're talking about the driver shortage. But when you're talking about electric or certainly propane, a lot of those buses, they operate a lot quieter, right, than your traditional diesel. So the drivers can actually hear, and maybe the students don't feel they have to be so loud to talk and visit over that, that hum and drone of the engine and the rattling and all that.
Absolutely. And from a driver standpoint, all of our drivers that drive alternative fuel, that's actually what they prefer. They say the vehicle that drives better, it has more get up and go to it. It is quieter, where you can hear the things going on in the cab.
Outstanding. Well, congratulations on the new gig there. Exciting stuff. And of course, for being president of TAPT, looking for always some great stuff coming out of Texas. And you guys are, the entire state is a great host to us for TSD conference. We'll have that in November. So we hope to see you there, Josh. And maybe we can get you on a couple panels or something. But hey, really appreciate you taking this time and updating us on what's going on there in Barbers Hill.
Absolutely. Thanks, Ron, again for having me today.
Hey, special thanks to Finn and Josh for joining us on the podcast today, and my co-host, Mr. Ryan Gray. Can't forget about him. He's been my ride or die all the way to 100 episodes. This is great. We've had a great time. We've sprinkled a little Taylor Hannon in there, too, along the way, and we couldn't have done it out with Producer Claudia, thank you so much for all your hard work.
Thank you, Claudia.
Yeah, right.
Claudia is the brains of the whole operation. So
I always say she's the wizard behind the curtain, and she makes all the magic happen. So special thanks to Claudia Newton, and also our sponsors, Transfinder. They've been with us since the beginning. So thank you, Antonio Civitella and Transfinder. We appreciate you, John Daniels. Our friends at Nuvi, we appreciate you sponsoring this episode. Really great to have you, and Scraper Systems as well. Thank you, guys. Really special to have you on this 100th episode. Also, visit stnonline.com for all the coverage on all the best school transportation topics you want to know about. We've got them. Latest news, industry releases, wire reports, thought leadership. Go to the website. Check that out, guys. Also, learn more. All the conferences. STN Expo Indianapolis, June. STN Expo Reno in July. And the TSD Conference in Dallas, Frisco, Texas in November. STNexpo.com and TSDconference.com for all the info there. You can stream, follow, tell all your friends about this podcast. You can also go to stnpodcast.com. Check that out. Apple, Spotify, everywhere you go. Spread the word. Get out there, nation. We love you. We appreciate you. Happy 100.